and I'm going through it. And my supervisor right over me knew I had made games, but didn't think anything more beyond that. And as I'm pulling out the Spyro art, his eyes just get bigger, and his draw literally just drops. And I got talking to him afterwards, and that Spyro was his game growing up.
Hey guys, it's Miharu, and welcome back to SpyroCast. This is episode 33, and today I'm excited to announce I have with me one of the creators of Spyro the Dragon, Craig Stitt. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, you just did. Hello, I'm Craig, and was there at the beginning for Spyro. So of all the games I worked on, Spyro is the one that is the nearest and dearest to my heart, personally. So it's always fun. I always love talking about it and sharing stories.
Yeah, it's so amazing. We were just talking before I hit record that you don't think about stuff like 20 years down the line. You don't think about like that you're going to be still talking about the stuff that you worked on.
Oh, you really don't. And I think part of it is back when we were doing this, there was no 20 years before that as far as
right, exactly.
But you don't. Yeah, it doesn't. I guess it's just so far. You just don't even consider it. At least I didn't. You're just you're just hoping that you get it done on time and that people like it and that this one game is a success. The concept of a franchise that lasts decades, no, that didn't even cross my mind. Yeah. So. But it's surreal. It's wonderful. It's so much fun to hear people and talk to people and like I said, wishing I had kept better notes, technical notes of what ideas came first and this kind of stuff and the order of stuff and because the other game I worked on that there's this enormous fan base and they really want the nitty gritty details is Sonic.
Yeah.
And, back then that was I wish I could remember more. Because lots of people have really good questions, and I'm like, I remember hearing that. I remember that meeting. I remember the discussion. I remember that presentation. I don't remember any details. So I wish I'd kept better notes back then. So,
right.
But Spyro, I was more involved in all the early concept stuff from the get go, and it's a little more recent. So I remember more on Spyro.
So what was your role at Insomniac and on the 3 Spyro games?
So Insomniac, I'd been working at Sega and had worked on a couple of the original Sonic titles and a few other games. And then about 95, just the chaos and the inability of Sega to get games out the door, it was time to move. And I wanted to work with Mark Cerny again, who had been the guy who hired me at Sega and was the producer lead at STI, Sega Technical Institute at Sega. And he'd left Sega after a couple of years. And I really wanted to work with him again. And he was down here in L.A., and he had a group of 3 guys who had never made a game before. But he saw something in them. And he was producing for Universal Studios at the time, who had just started a interactive game division. And so when I contacted Mark, he says, hey, I've got a group of guys down here. They need an artist. Come on down. Give it a test. And the original plan was I was just going to be there 3 months. Get them their first game out the door. And because I lived in San Jose. And so came down to L.A. for just 3 months, and we did a game called Disruptor, which was a Doom clone, which I wouldn't have been overly excited to work on, except for I really wanted to work with Mark again. But after working with these guys for a couple of months, I went, no, I like working with these guys. I love the energy here. So Disruptor, we finished Disruptor. I ended up going full-time with them, permanent with them, and Disruptor bombed. Well, the reviews were 5-star. We got excellent reviews across the board. Universal just completely failed to advertise it or market it.
Right. Yeah, I remember you saying something about that.
Yeah, I remember very clearly walking into GameStop or one of the game stores back then and going, "Hey, what do you think of it?" You're talking to the guy behind the counter. "Hey, what do you think of Disruptor?" He's like, "What?" I
go, "What's Disruptor?"
right behind you there. You have it on the shelf, and he'd never heard of it. But anyway, so we finished Disruptor. And what do we do next? And so Ted Price, who's the head, and at that point we had a few more people come in and help with Disruptor, but at the end of that they were contractors, they left, whatever. So it was just me, the 2 Hastings brothers as programmers, and Ted Price. And he says, "Okay, I'm gonna go to your corner. A couple weeks, come back with an idea of what you think Insomniac should do as their next game." And I think Al Hastings came back with an off-road racing game. I believe Ted had an alien invasion game, and I don't remember what Brian had. And I wanted to do this game where instead of fighting the dragon or riding the dragon, you got to be the dragon.
Yes.
So I've always loved dragons. And so I worked up an idea there, worked out a storyline and gameplay ideas, and pitched that. And we all pitched our ideas to each other. And everyone liked mine best, so they voted. Said, okay, well, let's do Craig's. So we polished it up and pitched it to Mark Cerny, who has gone on to do. He helped produce Naughty Dog. He's core right now. I think he's still working with Sony. Yeah, he's heavily involved. He's kind of got the Midas touch. He really has the ability to see potential in things. And Mark liked it. Now, the original idea for Spyro, well, didn't have a name for it yet. The original idea for this dragon game was you would hatch, and you'd be this newborn hatchling of a dragon. And each level or world time period, you would become a bigger, more powerful dragon. And so you would grow, you would age. You'd go from this little hatchling to this giant, fire-breathing, magic-using kind of Smog from Lord of the Rings, Dungeons & Dragons dragon.
I believe the original pitch was called, like, Dragon Span or something?
Dragon Span, because you get his lifespan.
Right.
And it's going from, kind of a Middle Earth kind of thing all the way through, like, Ice Ages and Stone Ages and Iron Ages and Industrial and Sci-Fi. And the basic premise was you had to collect your hoard, because dragons collect, they've got their hoard, but you also had to protect that hoard because humans and other creatures are trying to steal your hoard, and you occasionally get the fair maiden that you need to eat or whatever the storyline was there. And we polished that up a little bit and pitched it to Mark and to Universal, and they liked it, but Mark made two recommendations. And this kind of goes back to what we very first started talking about. Was I wasn't even thinking sequels at that. I just, what would be a fun game to play? Just a singular one-off game. Mm-hmm. And Mark has two suggestions. One, keep the dragon the same age, because sequels will be easier. I went, sequels. Yeah, sequels are a good thing. It's like, okay, keep him the same age and keep it. And this was the one that I think really made Spyro the game it is keep it cute, keep it fun, keep it family friendly. And his reasoning for that was that by the time we got this game out, the average age of the PlayStation 1 user was going to come down a number of years. And so we were going to have a slightly younger crowd. And so we repolished the game and reworked the game and ended up being a little cuter than we thought. But that was fine. I don't think we got so cute that we put people off, but we're cute enough and fun enough that we brought more people in. And so that's how we ended up with Spyro. So it's I would love to play the game I pitch. I think it would still be a very fun game. Would not have been a worldwide cross demographics, cross gender, cross age, worldwide hit.
Actually, when I was reading about the original pitch, it reminded me a lot of a PS2 game called Dragon Rage. Have you ever heard of that?
Not heard of that.
Yeah, it was a lot like that.
Maybe I'll have to look that up. I would love to play. I want to be the dragon. I want to hoard my gold, and I want to,
Yeah, it was something like you played as a big dragon, and I remember like swooping down and like dropping things on like villages or whatnot.
Okay, I'll have to look that up because that's the game I initially wanted to play, was being a dragon. If it's at the time, it's still surreal. That so much has come from that. Those original three games.
Mm-hmm. So you said you were the lead artist on these games.
Yeah. So at the beginning, I was a kind of lead artist, kind of quasi art director. Now I don't know if I ever had the title art director until maybe the third one, but that was kind of the role you're playing. But the teams were relatively small, and that was one of the wonderful things the early days at Insomniac, where the teams were very small. Everybody had input in game design and look and all that kind of stuff. It was a very collaborative environment, which was wonderful. So my primary thing, in the Spyro games, what I primarily ended up doing once we kind of had reworked the format was coming up with the worlds and the looks of the worlds, and then in the games itself, actually building the worlds, texturing them, and then I did almost all the skies in Spyro, was one of the things that when we first started doing it, one of the reasons Spyro was so successful is we had, Mark Cerny is this incredible programmer, and then the Hastings brothers are awesome. And so between the three of them working together, pushed boundaries. So there was a lot of technical stuff in Spyro that it was the first time it ever been done. But so the skies were a new thing, and when they were originally doing them, they were a pain in the butt to make. They were not fun. They were tedious. They only looked okay. Like, oh, and then Ted Price, he goes, "Hey, Craig, here, why don't you do these? Do one." And I went, "I really don't want to do this." And it was, they were miserable to do. They were very time consuming, limited. And then my first one came out really good and says, "Okay, well, that looks much better than mine. Okay, you're doing the skies from now on." I was initially very disappointed. Al, the programmer, continually improved the tools for making the skies. And very, very soon after that, making the skies became one of my favorite things to do. Because I found ways to make them much more creative and put much more energy and dynamic life into the skies. Build the 3D backgrounds, did the skies, did the textures. Actually picked the color and did the textures for Spyro himself. Didn't do the model. Here's the thing on Spyro is I pitched an idea for what's the physical drawing for Spyro once we'd come up with this new character idea. And he was a cute little dragon. But Charles Zemblis, who freelance artist we brought in to do the character designs, was so much stronger and so much better. I really would have loved to have kept it in house, and I'd really love to be able to say, "Oh yeah, no, I designed Spyro." But Charles was excellent, and I do need to learn how to draw Charles's little Spyro because people are always asking, "Oh, can you draw me a Spyro?" And I'm like, "Well, I can draw you a dragon, but my Spyros are terrible, so I don't even try."
Yeah, it's like that's not the Spyro that I designed.
Yeah, that's not the Spyro. So I can draw you a cool looking dragon, but anytime I try and draw Spyro, it's like, oh, what is that? Okay, but and anyone you may have heard the story on Spyro's color, where he was originally green, because dragons are green, and very quickly. We realized, one, a lot of the environments he's running around on grass. Grass is typically green.
Yes.
And we also realized there was Gex was another mascot character out at the time, and Croc. So another reptile, green reptile, Croc, green reptile, Yoshi, green reptile.
Yeah, we would just blend it into all that.
Yeah, and we're like, oh, and I swear there was a fourth one as well that we kind of, okay, no, we've got to come up with a different color. And so I did it at this, I made like a dozen or more different set of textures of colors of Spyro and put it all on videotape, and we watched it, and there was a number of colors that he actually looked really nice. He looked really good black, but you lost all the details, and he looked really good. There was another there was a red, kind of this brick red. He looked really nice.
Oh yeah, I saw a color test video, and the red one looked so cool. He had like the little yellow wings, I think.
Yeah, I loved him, but go back to generation of technology, the old CTR, CRT, the old tube televisions. Reds blurred and blew out and bloomed, so you'd lose all detail. And so it's like, okay, he looks good red on our monitors. On the TV, he just turns into this blurry thing. So we ended up going with this with a purple, which once again I think was just part of. You say purple dragon, and people know who you're talking about, even if they don't play video games. They probably know that there's this little purple dragon out there. So you've seen the videotape. Luckily, I still have. I managed to hang on to that. I don't have the original green there's a couple other colors that got clipped off because once again, we're not thinking. We're not. What's the word I'm looking for? Where you keep things for the future, like a library. Anyway, you're not thinking like that. And so you're not thinking, well, okay, here's these drawings. We're going to set these aside, and we're going to keep these tapes. So here's a videotape. Okay, we need to do some more animation tests. Slap it in there, and recorded some funky enemy walk over the front couple colors. So unfortunately, but I did manage to keep the tape, the 25 or almost coming up on 30-year-old VHS. So I need to. It's digitized now, but I need to find someone that has the tech to get rid of the frame popping and the distortion stuff. It's interesting to see the progression there. Well, the other really fun thing that when I get talking about the original green Spyro is we knew we had something very early on with Spyro. So the game pitch, and we've got the model up, and one of the first things we had was just Spyro running around. And I think the first time I played it, there may have been, it was just a flat green plane, maybe one little blocky structure, tombstone-y kind of thing, just in the middle to give you a reference point. And you just run around. And you just run around and charge, and it was fun. You could spend 10, 15 minutes doing nothing but chasing your tail, running around this flat, empty plane. No gameplay, no anything, just Spyro running around.
What's funny is I think that's what some people did when they first started playing the game when they were kids. Like, because if it's your first game, you don't know what games are and you don't know what to do. So that's what you do. You just run around.
And it was fun. It didn't. We're looking at it. There's no gameplay here, and this is fun. And it's like, okay, we've got it. So we realized at that point, okay, this is ours to lose because the game is fun right now, and there is no game. All we have is the character running around. And I think so. And I think that also goes right into one of the reasons it was so popular is every kid on the planet, myself included, with whatever I was doing, it wouldn't have been video games when I was a kid, but is Mom, come watch me play. Dad, come watch me play. Mom, come play this game with me. And there was really nothing more boring than watching somebody else play a video game, although I know people actually make livings doing that now. I don't get it, but anyway. But
people watch me play video games all the time.
There's a whole industry of people watching people do stuff. But it shows that, then the mom play with me, and they'd the kid would hand their parent or the controller, and the parent doesn't know how to play. There's just mashing buttons, and the game's too violent or too dark or just not something they're into. Spyro was fun to watch. I still enjoy watching people play Spyro. And so the little kid could hand their mom the controller or say, "Hey, Mom, just watch me," and Mom or Dad or the aunt or uncle or grandma wasn't bored. In fact, they now wanted to play. And so, and it was simple enough to just run around and fun enough just to run around. You could say, I can do this. And and then the gameplay was basic enough and simple enough. And so we got this 4-year-olds playing it and 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds playing the game, and male and female and everybody could have fun with it. And I think that was a very rare thing at the time. And so, yeah, I remember I used to answer the fan mail as well. And, a lot of them were just good old handwritten letters with a stamp on it. A bunch of them were a mom writing. I remember moms writing, or grandmas, and say, "Hey, my son or my daughter loves Spyro. We played as a family, and little Jimmy or Sally, they're stuck on level 6. Do you have a hint to how to get past this?" And at the bottom of the letter, it would say something like, "And by the way, I'm stuck on this level." Johnny's stuck on 6. I'm stuck on level 11. And I remember one mom very friendly swearing at me, just going, "There's no one. You guys are evil. There's no one to tell me to put the controller down at 1 o'clock in the morning. So I'm up all night playing this game, trying to beat this level." And so I think that sets Spyro apart. And I love that fact. I love the fact that you didn't have to be a hardcore gamer to enjoy it, and that moms and dads and grandmas enjoyed watching and playing.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think about how, because it's such a gameplay driven experience that anyone could just pick up the controller and just have fun with it.
Yeah, and yet at the same time, the tricky part there is hardcore gamers still enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. There was enough complex gameplay and puzzle solving and getting your jumps just right and trying to get 100% or a perfect score that your hardcore players liked it. So I think we got I'll do a 50-50 of skill and luck on that. A lot of work went into that, but the fact that we got the right mix was Mark Cerny pointing us in the right direction, and then a lot of skill and a lot of luck of getting that right. So, yeah.
That's so great. All right. Do you have a favorite level that you worked on?
One of my favorite ones visually, I don't remember any of the names, and all 3 games kind of blur together for me.
Yeah.
But I love the nighttime one with the trees, where you're running around the trees. The giant tree. All it is just trees and ramps around the outside of the trees, and you're jumping from tree to tree.
Treetops?
Treetops.
Yes.
The sky on that one I enjoyed doing. It was a fun level for me to build. It was but that was also probably one of the hardest levels in the game. I remember getting lots of complaints and lots of fan letters going, "How do you solve this problem?" But there was something about that one that I enjoyed doing. If I had to pick a all-time favorite, it would be Skelos. I think it's in 2.
Skelos Badlands?
Yes. So with all the little skeletal and the bone structures and the giant, like, fossilized, skulls and sticking out in the lava and that kind of stuff. I love bones. I love skeletons. So you mix bones and skeletons and dragons. And so that was one where I just really, really had fun making that one. So that's one of my favorites to just look at. And had a lot of fun working up the textures on that. Trying to make the bones fun and not too dark and, creepy looking. And yet still skeletons and bones.
Yeah, I like that stuff too. It's funny how you say treetops is one of your favorites. That's actually my favorite level in the first game.
Yeah.
I actually didn't have to figure out how to do that supercharge challenge by myself because by the time I got there, I had already had the guidebook in my possession. So I was able to just read the guidebook, and that's how I figured that out. One thing that stumped me and that I could not figure out until I had the guidebook was how to get the dragon in Dry Canyon, the one where you have to do a blind glide. I don't know if you remember that.
Now. I really enjoyed doing the desert levels as well from Spyro 1.
Yes.
Yeah, a couple of those glides you got to hit just right.
Yeah, that I couldn't figure out that blind glide. That just, like, it didn't occur to me as a kid that was, like, a thing. I was like, I see that dragon up there and I don't know how to get him.
Well, that's one of the things that got cut from the game. Once again, I want to say this was 2. They got cut from the game because we finished the game. The artwork was done. It was pretty much locked down. We're just doing the final bug testing, and I went on vacation for 2 weeks. And I came back just before we shipped the game, and it was it's embarrassing to not know these names or know these better, but they really do all blur together for me. But it was the kind of crystal floating out with the purple crystals, these kind of floating islands in space, and you're jumping between islands and
Crystal Islands.
Okay, we were really original with our names. Weren't we?
It's really funny because you describe them exactly as their name is.
As the name is. But that was another fun one. The crystals there, the big purple crystals, I really enjoyed doing, and that overall floating island of the big crystals, I really, really enjoyed. But that one had a hidden gem where you would. Well, it wasn't hidden. It was just kind of a fun thing. It was. Remember what you had to collect something or finish up something, and then this one whirlwind would open up in the center, and the whirlwind is still there. But the whirlwind.
Oh, you mean the one in Midnight Mountain, the homeworld?
Is there one? I'm trying to think now. Because this one, the whirlwind goes up, but originally the design with this thing went up and up and up and up, and then sent you off in the distance. Because if you were standing on these islands, you could look out, and there were islands painted into the sky. But there was also this one island that was physical, but it was just barely there, but you could see a little twinkle on it of the gems sparkling, and you would glide, and you just this I remember timing it, this really long glide all way out to it, and there was no big thing there. It was just a super fun long glide, and you'd pick up a couple of gems and bust a chest. But I came back and that was gone. They'd moved that island just literally a hop and skip off one of the other islands and shortened the glide to something simple. And I'm like, They didn't. No, they didn't. They built a new island. They left the other island way out there. And so there was this, you could look out there and see sparkly stuff in the distance, but there was no way to get to it. And so I think that got fixed either in the second pressing of the disc or something where they took those sparkles off or something. But yeah. Well, the other funny one there, and this is, Insomniac was still a relatively small group, and so there's a lot of communication, but we're getting bigger and growing. And I even now, I don't know how this fell through the cracks, but the game designers pitched this idea about these little forest islands, and it was all about the forest and with forest creatures. So you had a beaver and a bear and something else. And
that was Crystal Islands, yeah.
So this one's and then all of a sudden it went off, and then somehow along the line somebody decides no, with the trees there's not a good way to do the trees, or somehow it got switched over to crystals. So you've got these beautiful, glowing purple crystal islands, and the first time the animations dropped in, here's a bear and a beaver.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at that, and like, why? Who designed this? Why is there a bear on it? It was just complete communication breakdown. Luckily, the easy fix on the bear was they just turned the textures translucent, so you now had a crystal bear.
Yeah.
the flying beaver or something. I don't remember. I remember
yeah, it's
that
flying beaver.
Yeah, that was still a little out there.
Yeah, it's very weird. You can see where things kind of got a little mixed up there. You're just like,
yeah,
this is
I still have no idea. And it wasn't just that had to be a miscommunication that lasted a couple of weeks, and where the animators were so busy that they. Yeah, and we were too busy, and there was just no communication there, and that until it actually physically got put into the screen together. So I don't know how that happened.
Yeah. What you were saying about the whirlwind, that's the one in Midnight Mountain, I believe, because what I remember hearing was that after you beat the sorceress, there was a whirlwind in that room that took you up and sent you over to an island in the distance, and that was where the super bonus round portal used to be.
That's sounding. Oh, yes. Yeah, that is where the portal was. Yes, you're right. It wasn't just a couple gyms. It actually was the portal to the bonus. Okay. I still don't know why they cut that out. It functioned. It worked. I mean, you could blow that glide. If you got off course, you could fall short. It was just because it was just kind of fun. I don't know why. I never really got a good answer. That was Brian Hastings, the lead programmers, cut that at the last minute. I never got a good reason why.
Yeah, so that island actually still exists, and there are three lives on that island. And you know what the funny thing is? They actually added that whirlwind back in the Reignited trilogy.
Did they?
Yes, I thought that was so cool of them.
Oh, okay. So I'm sad to say, I've very briefly played the Reignited trilogy. I've watched people play it quite a bit. Because I got burned out on games, and literally the newest game system I have is a PS2, and it's in a box in the garage, and actually I can't find that box now. I was just looking for it, and I can't find it. But no, I need to get a new system, because I'd love to play the Reignited games. I think they did a really wonderful job on those. I've got a few complaints, but I think they did a wonderful, wonderful job.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we all have complaints, don't worry.
The only one that really bugs me is Spyro's the wrong color.
He is a little bit of a different shade of purple.
He's very fuchsia. And I remember seeing the teaser trailers for it. And so I actually wrote Toys for Bob. I know this is just my opinion, but I actually chose the color and painted the original textures for Spyro. So put that into my consideration here. Mm-hmm. He's beautiful. The model I love their model, Spyro. He's absolutely gorgeous. People will be mad to hear this. I like him better than our original Spyro.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's the model has just got the personality. Now the colors I shifted, not just the pink, because he's kind of this fuchsia color, and then the crest on his head and his his horns are the same color, and at certain angles they blend together, so the antlers should be a little more textured or a little browner, be closer to like the original Spyro colors. Mm-hmm. But his face and expression and his general build and proportions are beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. But I do some color protection. I do some texturing changes, color changes.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of mods that fix that for us.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. So
I remember you saying one time something about Spyro's wings, how they were like wrong.
Oh yes, and I was watching your video. It was watching your YouTube video where it became even more. Was it yours? No, it was another video. And he was comparing the progression from the different designs of Spyro over the years.
Okay.
It's very interesting to watch because there's a big chunk in the middle where I never played them and never watched them, and just had left the industry and just really wasn't paying any attention. But there were still Spyro games going. The Nintendo, the Game Boy games and handheld games and stuff. But no, yeah, if you go back to the original Spyro, so if you look at a bat wing or a dragon wing, that's their hand. That's their arm and their hand.
Yes.
And the little fingers coming down through the wing are literally the fingers of the hand. And so they all come from the wrist. And there's a shoulder and an elbow and a wrist and fingers and joints in the finger. And if you go back and you look at the original Spyro, I'm trying to think if the original box art, if Chuck, who did the box art, did this. I think he may have. Let me just look it up really quick here. Actually, it's right on the box cover, it looks like. Anyway, well, that's the Reignited. Okay. Anyway, I won't bother. But for some reason, I knew this, but for some reason, when I textured the wings, those spars, the fingers, just come straight down off the length of the wing. They don't all originate from the wrist. They come out evenly spaced along the wing. And I didn't realize it until I don't even know when. The game may have already shipped. So I'm pretty sure I was able to go in because when they did a second print, they printed 1 million, or they printed X number, hundreds of thousands of copies. And if it sells well enough, they'll do a second printing. And we got the call, hey, yeah, it's selling. We need to, you need some more. And now we can fix a few of the bugs that either came out after the fact or we weren't quite able to fix. And I remember fixing that wing.
Yeah.
But, you look through, and then on some of the sudden I watch videos. I watch the original game, and that wing. I've never heard anybody else complain about it. It's just something that drives me nuts. I don't know why it bothers me so much. It's just wrong. It's just no. That's not how the biology works. That's not how it's supposed to work.
I guess we just never noticed because it looked good enough.
Yeah, I guess so.
Can you recall any funny or memorable stories from your time at Insomniac?
Oh, I remember there's one. I mean, this is kind of going, this is still in Spyro, is some people have picked this up and seen it in the games. On Spyro 2, there's the big, the second hub, the summer hub. There's a big white castle. But anyway, so I carved in the scroll work on the castle walls. It said, my son's name is Brian, spelled with a Y, is Brian, carved in this elaborate texture. And those same textures are reused everywhere, but it's just bits and pieces of that carving. There's only a couple of spots, or maybe only one real spot where you can see his whole name carved. And so you really don't notice it until it's pointed out to you. You happen to go, hey, that looks like something, and stop and try and read it.
Yeah.
Well, because I wanted it pretty subtle, because I didn't want, Easter eggs should be subtle. And also I didn't want somebody coming up to me and go, hey, no, that's too late. You got to pull it out. And you really don't have much time to do this kind of stuff. Easter eggs, it amazes me on stuff when there's games full of Easter eggs, because they take time. It's like, when did you get time to do this when just trying to get it out the door? But anyway, the story goes on that Oliver Wade, who is the head of animation, noticed it. And he has a son named Brian, spelled with a Y, but he also has a daughter named Brenda. And so he goes, hey, I saw Brian, but I can't point that out to my son. Unless, could you carve Brenda someplace? Can you hide the name Brenda in? Oh, yeah. And so in Midnight something, the big black castle.
Winter Tundra?
Winter Tundra. At the top of the door, there's these big, I believe the big wooden doors with brass and gold hinges, yes. and it says Brenda. Now that one really was quick and dirty, because it literally is just, I just wrote Brenda at the top and put a little drop shadow on it, and a little, make it quick brass. But that way Oliver could go, hey, look, your name's in the game. Both of your names are in the game. The other fun one, this one kind of has kind of a sad ending, is one of the early animators from very, very early on, Spyro 1.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, Dan Johnson.
Dan Johnson, yep.
And I don't know how this happened, but he became the company mascot.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious if in the Insomniac's new games, if they still hide his picture somewhere in the games. I would like to think so. But yeah, there's a coin in one where you're collecting coins, and the coin, if you zoom in on it, it's got, because somebody stole his driver's license and scanned in his driver's license and used that picture and then stylized it, but it's still very clearly Dan. And so he's on the face of the coin in the one in the dinosaur cowboy level. The wanted poster is Dan with a mustache.
Yes.
And I know if you go on into the Ratchet and Clank games, Dan is still in there. Unfortunately, Dan passed away not too long after that. I left Insomniac. I think he left Insomniac before I did, or maybe he left after I did. But it wasn't that long after that he passed away. Mm-hmm. And so that was sad. But his, I really hope they're still putting him in the games. I know he's in some of the Ratchet and Clank games. So
yeah, I think he's always in Ratchet and Clank games. Like in some of my favorites, actually, there's like 2 references to him in A Crack in Time.
That's one I haven't played. That one I remember. That's the PS4. Crack in
It's
Time?
PS3.
PS3. I know one of them maybe was you're watching it, or maybe it's the one after that. There's the newest one. I'm so out of touch here; it's embarrassing. But I'm watching the advertisement for it, and the only way you could tell that they were going from gameplay footage to cutscene footage was the camera would all of a sudden spin around. The camera on the cutscenes, the camera's moving around like on a TV show or a movie.
Right.
And then gameplay, all of a sudden the camera spins around and locks behind Ratchet. And I'm watching this going, the graphics didn't change. That was my realization of just how far technology has come, is that the cutscenes graphics and the gameplay graphics are the same graphics, which is just mind-blowing. If you go back, just, the systems before, there's always such a huge difference.
So how long did you stay with Insomniac? Did you have anything to do with Ratchet and Clank, or did you leave before that?
Yeah. So I started, like I said, I was their first employee. I was the first, well, I think they had a contract artist in there before me, but I was their first actual employee. So that was 1995. So I came down to LA, and I left around 2005. So I was there about 10 years. And so all, Disruptor, and then the 3 Spyro games. Then they left Universal, which was hard. There was good reason. Universal was incompetent and very difficult to work with. But I really didn't want to leave Spyro behind.
Case in point, Enter the Dragonfly.
Yeah, which your video just totally nailed. Yeah, it was literally painful the first time I sat down to play it. I was really looking forward to what's Spyro going to look like on the PS2? Not that. So so I was there, and then we had a false start before Ratchet and Clank. Never got a real name for the game. We just kind of called it Stick Girl.
Stick Girl.
Because it was this girl who ended up, as we're doing this, the Disney movie Atlantis comes out, and I can't remember the girl's name in that. She's the Atlantean with the long white hair and
Kita.
Look, the two of them could have been sisters. We're like, okay, is this going to be a problem? Because I think it's the reason they look so much alike is the guy who designed our character, and the Atlantis story is just stolen straight out of a Japanese anime.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the paths crossed. If I understood it correctly, Disney actually bought the rights to it, then buried it, and then came out with Atlantis. But that's a whole other thing that I don't know much about. But anyway, so this game, it would have been beautiful. The graphics for it were just absolutely gorgeous. The characters were awesome, but the gameplay was really boring. It was just slow. So it would have been an absolutely gorgeous game, but not. So it's been the opposite of Spyro. It's like we had all this beautiful world, and you're walking around in, and I'm not having any fun at all. Mm-hmm. So we were on that for a year and a half or so, quite a while. And Ted comes in and goes, "Hey, I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is we're going to stop." I think at the time they're calling it I-5 because it was Insomniac's 5th game. We're stopping development on I-5, and the good news is we're stopping development on I-5. And very quickly, then Ratchet and Clank was the next one. And the beginnings of it came together very quickly. I didn't have anything to do with the initial concept work on the Ratchet games. That kind of came, and the name came together really quick. Because Spyro, that was a long process coming up with a name for him. You probably heard he was originally his working name was Pete. And so that was a play off Pete's Dragon. Everyone's always, you couldn't do that because Disney was like, no, you're missing the joke. Pete is the name of the little boy in Pete's Dragon. The dragon's name's Elliot. And we never planned on him being named Pete. But we needed a name for us, to name files and to know when we were talking about him. Although I will say that after a year and a half of calling him Pete, in my heart, he was Pete. It was very hard to rename him. And it was also really hard to come up with a name. Because not only did it have to be something we liked, it had to pass legal. And it was this, so we'd pitch a bunch of ideas to Universal, and then Universal would run it through their lawyers, and then come back, no, that got shot down, no, you can't use that because of this, and you can't use that. And really, we're kind of really close, like, okay, no, we need to start actually having press releases and stuff, and we need a name for the game. And somebody at Sony, and we'd thrown out the name Pyro a bunch of times, but it was a little too on the nose. and we didn't want kids becoming pyros. And somebody at Sony pitched Spyro, and everyone goes, yes, and it passed legal. Brian Hastings was really pissed because he's like, hey, I pitched that like 3 months ago and nobody liked it.
Yeah, oh my god, I can imagine.
Like, I don't remember him pitching it, but I totally believe he did, and we just blew it off. So I've always felt bad for Brian that he didn't get recognition for Spyro. But that was, well, in fact, the name Insomniac. We're finishing up Disruptor. When I started there, they were called Extreme Games. Extreme. And we're getting closer. I think it was Extreme with 2 X's, or it was spelt weird. I know it wasn't just 1 X, and there was something different. And we're getting closer and closer to Disruptor, needing to, advertise Disruptor. Didn't have a name for the company yet. And that one went around and around and around and around. Somebody said Insomniac, and we all just kind of looked at each other like, we're up all night long working on these, so that's the perfect name. But Ratchet and Clank came together, the character design, at least from my perspective, came together really fast. And the name was, I think it was Chuck Song, who was one of the animators on Spyro, came up with the name, and everyone just went, yes. I don't think there was it just really just came together fast, which is nice, because it's kind of frustrating to have the hardest part of doing something is coming up with a name for it. It seems so simple, but it is not.
Are there any projects you're working on currently?
Not in the games field. The one project I'm working on is just trying to the collection of my drawings and the other things that I have from the various games I worked on, and the videotape, like the color of Spyro, and of getting that well organized and well documented. Archive. That's the word I was trying to remember earlier.
Archive. There we go. I was going to say like cataloging, but I was like, I don't think that's the right word.
Well, since catalog is a really close word, but yeah, archiving is my project right now is to get this stuff cataloged and archived and out there. Not just so that the hardcore fans can find it, but for the casual people can find it. The people who love Spyro, but they're not digging the internet looking for interviews or YouTube channels or this and that kind of stuff, TikTok videos. It's just something there that they can find it and enjoy it, because it is such a huge piece of people's lives, and I want to get it out there and get it documented. The other thing that's in the process is, and maybe another video out there was a prototype that I did while I was at Sega, called Astropede or Segapede. Segapede was the initial production title. Then Astropede, it was initially supposed to take place in the Sonic universe, and pitched the idea to Sega. And this was right after Sonic 2. And they liked the idea. They liked the gameplay. They liked the character. They didn't want it in the Sonic universe. Possibly because I was an American. There were some issues there. But so I reworked it, and then they actually gave it the green light. We went into production, but it didn't. We worked on it for over a year. Excuse me. But then they ended up, Sega at the time, STI was trying to do 5 games simultaneously, and they had enough people to maybe do 2, and so they ended up putting on hold a whole bunch of games, and one of them was this Astropede game. But I've got the prototype that's a playable version, and I finally tracked down a playable version of it, because I had the motherboard. I had the big green board with the chips stuck in it. That's in the box with the missing PS2, and I can't find it, along with a couple other prototypes we did at Sega. But I now have that code, and I'm just trying to decide the best way to get it out so people can play it. It's buggy and that kind of stuff, but it's really fun. And it actually uses some artwork from Sonic 2. They got cut at the last minute, so it didn't end up in the original Sonic 2, although Sega's newest Sonic Origins has put that level back in the game. And so that artwork it finally is out there where it can be seen and played by people. So that's on my to-do list. But yeah. But the games, everything is so incredible now, and there's so I came into the games industry kind of right at the beginning of the golden age of video games, where you had the big Sega Nintendo wars and Sony coming in, this huge transition, and now there's so many games out there and so many companies, and it's hard because there's some wonderful games out there you're never even going to hear of because there's just so much. and handheld and all the different systems. And it'd be very daunting to get into the game industry. I was very, very fortunate not only to be in the industry, but working for like Sega or working, for Sony, and having that kind of mass behind you was huge.
Well, PlayStation is the one thing that has always stuck with me ever since I got a PS1. So
yeah.
I don't get Nintendo consoles anymore, but every time a new PlayStation system comes out, I will get it.
Yeah, I would be the same way, except for I said I would love to have the new. If I were to buy a new system now, it'd be one of the PlayStation systems, because there is this loyalty almost to a fault in my personality. So, but yeah, it's what the technology is. If you look back, a great comparison. What was very strange, coming back from Sega, and everything was literally drawn pixel by pixel, and you had palettes of 4, 8, or 16 colors, and you can only have X number, 64 colors on the screen at any given time, and that kind of limitation. To coming to Disruptor on the first PS1 game I worked with, was like, oh no, you just use Photoshop and you paint it and you stick it on there, and you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
But which was huge. But the great comparison of the differences between each of these iterations of the system, like the PS1. So you look at Spyro, and a large level on Spyro was 8,000 polygons, making up the entire world. So the mountains, and the trees, and everything was 8,000 polygons. And you then go to Ratchet and Clank ones, the PS2. So in the Metropolis level on Ratchet and Clank, so the big city level with the flying cars, when you first enter that level, you walk through and there's this kind of circular archway you step through, and you're on this little round balcony looking down like the main boulevard, these huge skyscrapers on both sides, all the way to the end of the city, and this giant pyramid building at the end of the city that's the train station. And that's where you're trying to get to in the level. That train station, just that building alone, is 8,000 polygons.
Oh.
And if you take the base of that train station, it's the square footage of an entire Spyro world.
Oh my god.
So that's how much bigger a Ratchet and Clank world is to a Spyro world.
Wow. That's an incredible leap.
It was huge. And yet you still had the same amount of time to do it.
Yeah.
Your tools got better and your machines got faster, but you still have the same, but you're just, it doesn't matter how fast. In fact, I'm sure right now, whoever's working on the PS5 or the new Xbox, I'm sure their big concern is frame rate and, all that kind of stuff.
Everything's got to be 60 FPS nowadays.
Yeah,
Or higher.
Or higher. So some of the stuff my son's playing is like 240.
Yeah.
Like, what do you need that for? But that and that's, yeah, I'm curious now on, I'd love to see some of the numbers for like Spyro Reignited, where they've literally rebuilt the world, the same worlds, just smoother and more detail. I'd love to see what those numbers are, and just to see, how many, what kind of a leap that, how many zeros you've added on the number of polygons.
Yeah.
On each level. So, but yeah, Spyro's, yeah, he's awesome.
And I guess that's where we'll end it. Yeah, Spyro is awesome, and you are awesome for being on SpyroCast. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. If you got any more questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Just send them my way.
I'm sure I will think of some.
I'd love to. Hopefully, I can remember the answers.
Hopefully,
it's been enjoyable. I thoroughly have enjoyed talking. So, thank you.
Thank you all so much for listening. As always, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe for more casual gaming content, and I will see you next time. Until then, this is Miharu, signing off.